All right, we're back to get this thing heat treated. Here's our 8.5 inch gyuto. If you watched the last video, you saw that we got this all forged out. The spine's really close to where it should be. It's the profile that's the problem area. So first things first, I'm gonna go ahead and line the back of this up as best I can. That might be where we're gonna want it. Okay, so I'm just gonna mark the back here, kind of where everything should be. Oops, don't do that. Try to get things cut out as close as we can get them. There, that's gonna be our gyuto right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and head over to the grinder and we'll get this shaped up and then get some rough bevels put in here just so we can get this edge nice and thin so it'll cool quicker, so we can get our hamon, and then we'll get this heated up and hardened. All right, let's kick on the suction. Doesn't work great, but it works better than no suction. Kick that on, speed it up. Just like that. I'm going to run this on the flat because I actually like my chef's knives to have a flat right here. So when you chop and you hit, you know you're at the heel. But on my gyutos, I go my curve to my flat, but then I add a little bit of rock to it. Just like that. So that way when you get to the flat, it actually rocks just a little bit more. There we go. Get these burrs off of there. Ooh. So I'm just looking at the tip of this. I think I've got to heat that up a little bit because I thinned this out at the tip and it's straight, but when it hits this tip, it goes like that. So this part's straight. The back side is straight, but the front has got a wiggle that way that is going to be a little more than I'll be able to work out in the grinding. So I'll have to fix that really quick. Anyway, so now I'm going to grind a little bit out of here before I put the wheel on, the small wheel. Get as much as I can with this. That's looking pretty good. Got a little bit of, we need a little more width right here. Yeah, we'll be fine. we'll be okay with that. I'm gonna leave that like that for now until I get my my file guide on here. And I'm gonna put the small wheel on and then work this out to where I want it. I'm not entirely sure what size this wheel is, but I think that's where I want the choil as far as a radius. Crank this down. All right. Yep, I like that smaller wheel. Oh, that's perfect. Get those burrs off of the edges there. Oh yeah, beautiful. So typically when I put my file guide on here, okay, first I'll show you. So when I make my cutlery, knives that you're going to be using on a cutting board, whatever, I usually offset my blade to the spine. If this is your cutting board right here, when you put the heel hits, you're going to notice that my handle shoots kind of up at an angle. And that's because when you're holding on to it, if you're like this, your knuckles are going to be more prone to hitting the cutting board. So I offset it just a little bit so it shoots upward, so you have more clearance between your knuckles and the surface. So anyway, I want my handle to follow the spine, so the handle shoots upward instead of coming down toward the cutting surface. So with that in mind, when I put my file guide on, what I do is I take a 90 degree and I put it on my spine like so. And I hold that on there and I push my file guide to where it should be on the knife. I hold everything in place. And then I lock it down. Then when I get it all tightened up, it should be 90 degrees to my spine, not 90 degrees to my edge. This is where I will cut in my shoulders over at the grinder. So I used to get my shoulders close with the grinder and then finish them off with a file. But apparently tungsten carbide is a really hard material. And as long as you're not using, you know, like a 36 grit, you're not gonna do anything to the tungsten. I mean, you might scratch off the finish. That's about it. And I've been doing this for a little while and I haven't noticed any issues. With the file guide. So I just do it this way now. And one other thing I like to do is throw a 90-degree on here, just to ensure that I'm shooting my tang the right direction. So looks good down here. I think I just need to take a little more off the back, toward the back side. And I'll tell you how that's vibrating like that. You got to be careful with that sometimes, because I've had the vibration snap a tang before. I'm guessing that the harmonics of it just kind of hit the right frequency and snap it, kind of like breaking a glass with your voice type of thing. Get this. And it definitely doesn't hurt to go back with a file and clean things up, but doing it this way reduces that file work quite a bit. Anyway, that's pretty close to where we need to be. If we need to make any adjustments to the tang, that can be done afterward. That's not a big deal at all. All right, so I drew a center line, and I'm just gonna put some rough bevels in this. Basically, get the edge just thinner than it is. Maybe, you know, like 1/16 of an inch, somewhere down around there, maybe a little more. Anyway, I'm gonna grind those in really quick. And I'm just looking at this steel after grinding with an 80 grit, and it definitely looks different than what, like, say, a 1084 would look like. Interesting. Okay, I got the blade ground 50 thou is what I did the edge to. Should be just fine at that thickness, but got some rough bevels. They'll go up a little bit higher than this during the final grind, but for now, this is what we got. So I'm gonna use some of my Satanite to put the clay on the back. And I used to have a spoon out here to scoop this stuff up, but who knows where that went to. So let's see if we can do this without making a big old mess. I may have put too much water in there. Oh, that's way too wet. And that may not be wet enough. We'll need some more water. It's a whole process. So you don't have to use Satanite for this. You can just get some of that Rutland's high heat cement. That's what I used for a long time. It works just fine. And I feel like this is a pretty good mix. Maybe add just a touch more water. Oh yeah. So I know some people wrap wire and all that stuff, but I've had pretty good luck with just glopping this crap on here. So basically I'll just put it on and coat the spine. You don't have to go really thick on this. I mean, you can if you want to, but you don't have to. And as far as drying goes, I've done this where I put it in the kiln, I mean right after I put this stuff on there. Like I'll hit it with a heat gun and get the outside of it just to harden up a little bit. And it's worked fine. I mean, it falls off during the quench, but it's basically already done, hardened, you know? So kind of do it how you want. This one, I'm not quite sure how I'll do it. It's starting to get a little bit late and I don't know if I want to watch a temper until midnight, but we'll see what happens. So basically once I get the back coated, then I'll kind of just use my finger and then push this stuff where I want it. I really don't know. I mean, I know it makes a difference where you put this stuff. But how much of a difference it makes, I'm not too sure. I've messed around with it a lot and seems like I get varying results. Even if I do some with the same patterns and stuff, I feel like I get varying results. So, I mean, I just may not be that great at it. But anyway, you just basically push this stuff around until you get it in the design you want. And I really want just some random stuff going on here. I don't want some perfect little wavy line. To me, that's not great looking. So it's just my preference is all. So I kind of like how this side looks. And we'll mess with this side just a bit. Gotta wipe this off my fingers. I'm just putting it back on there. There we go. All right. I think that's probably good. It's got a nice random thing going on here. There. That should work for me. So I'm just gonna put this on my rack and let it dry a little bit. So as far as quenching on this stuff, I'm not entirely sure. The closest thing I found was 26C3 steel, which on Knife Steel Nerds, Laren talks about how similar it is to the Shirogami or the Hitachi White #1. And I think that's how Devin Thomas heat treats his. And I know he uses this stuff quite often. He's the one who calls it spicy white. And so basically their data on the 26C3 says that this stuff, when you basically quench it at 1475 and you do it in a fast oil, which is Parks 50, which is what I'm going to use. And when you do the temper, apparently this stuff is pretty tough at a very low temper. So I'm gonna shoot for a 325 temper, 325 degree temper, and that should put it between 64 and 65 Rockwell. They tested it at they did 300 degrees and then 350 and then kind of up from there. And I guess after they tempered over 450, it started to lose its toughness. So apparently this stuff you don't want to temper over 450 because you're just kind of contradicting the toughness versus hardness. So what I want is I'm going to shoot for 64 to 65 Rockwell. I'm going to temper at 325 degrees. I normally temper at 350. And I'm going to go a little bit lower because apparently this stuff is supposed to be tougher. So we'll see how that all works out. So we're going to quench it 1475 in Parks 50 and then temper 2 cycles, 2 hours apiece at 325. And hopefully this thing is super hard and nice and tough. Not tough like, 5160 tempered at 400 degrees or so, 450, but it's still going to be really tough. So here we go. Okay, we're heating this guy up to 1475. I'm hoping that Satanite is cured up enough so it doesn't fall off in the forge or in the kiln, but we should be good. So currently we are at 1041 degrees. Got just a few more minutes till it's heated up, and then we're gonna do a 10-minute soak and then give it a dip. Okay, it is quench time. So let's see if we can get this in here nice and quick. Scooch my oil over a little bit here, get closer. So with the clay, you have to leave it in the oil just a little bit longer. I've made the mistake where I pull it out too quick and think that it's good and I hang it up, but the steel under the clay is still really warm, and then the temper or the heat from the spine travels up to the edge and then kind of screws up the heat treat. Out a little bit longer in the oil, but as you can see, the clay stayed on there really well, or the satinite. So let me see if I can brush this clay off. Yep, it'll pop off of there pretty easy. There we go. Kind of put it back in here just to make sure we're nice and cooled off. All right. And I'm hoping that we're straight. Should be straight because we clayed it. Usually works out pretty well when you have a clayed spine. Just going to let this hang until it cools down a little bit more, and I'll put it in the temper. All right, there's really no need to do a video of the tempering, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to temper this at 325 for 2 hours, and then when I do the second temper, I'll set this up on a little jig to see if I can get the bend out of it. The bend's not bad, but it's enough that I'm going to want it out of there. So I'm going to pop this in here and then get this all tempered up. The tempering's done, and I could not get the warp out of there. So the warp's pretty minor. If this was a knife that I was going to be grinding all the way up to the spine, then I could get this warp out. But because it's not, we're going to take a little intermission, and I'm going to make a little tungsten hammer, tungsten ball bearing hammer. So if you haven't heard about these, apparently they're becoming all the rage. I guess they've been around for a while in like the auto industry, like auto body industry, and I mean, I guess a long time ago some knife makers started using them. But I've heard good and bad about them. You know, machinists say be careful because the tungsten carbide will explode. But I mean, who knows? I mean, I think if we were just like doing little taps, it's gonna be fine. Anyway, I got these little 3/8 inch tungsten carbide balls, and I'm gonna slap this hammer on the mill, and I'm gonna take and make a 3/8 inch hole up in the top here. And then I guess there's two different ways of doing this. You can press fit or you can solder. And I'm gonna do the solder. I got some soldering sticks, or brazing sticks that will work with the tungsten carbide, hopefully. And I'm just hoping it all works. I'm not the best at brazing and all that stuff, but I am really curious to see if, you know, a few light taps is going to take this warp out of here. So intermission, we're going to take care of all this and see if we can get this blade straightened out. Had to make a few adjustments. I think this was a little bit hard, so I heated it up, and now it seems to be cutting okay. Anyway, I just need to cut a hole. It's so the ball's 3/8, so I want to go a little more than half of 3/8 deep, so that half the ball, a little less than half the ball, is poking out. All right, and that should be enough. Slightly over 3/16. So hopefully that ball fits in there beautifully. Anyway, here's where we're at right here. Boop. Okay, so let's see how well that ball fits in there. So these were relatively inexpensive. I think it was, man, I got these on Amazon. I think it was like $10 for 2 of them. I mean, not exactly cheap, but so here's where we are. I feel like it needs to go a little bit deeper. That's about, I mean, it's pretty close to halfway, but the fit is really nice. But I just feel like it needs to go a little bit deeper. Maybe it doesn't, because I'm gonna build up the braze, the silver, up a little bit higher. So, I mean, maybe this is fine. Let me see what I can do. Ready to attempt some brazing. I took that hole down just a little bit more. Should be all nice and clean in there. And I feel, so the fit, it's not as tight as I was expecting. So I think that's good, because I feel like the solder is going to flow underneath really well and fill in any of that empty space inside and just basically give it a better fit. So here's the solder that I got, or the braze, and this is Safety Seal 56. I had 45 also. Honestly, I don't know enough to know the difference, but I was told this should work. And this has the flux on it. It's flux coated, so I don't have to worry about spreading the flux in there. Hoping this works as well as it should. I don't know, but we're about to find out. We'll just get going on this. And I'm hoping this doesn't burn up the handle. Heat doesn't travel that far, so I don't want to have to rehandle this thing. Well, that tungsten heats up quick. It definitely looks like it's flowing nicely in there. Yeah, I made a bit of a mess, but as long as it works, I'm okay with that. So I don't have a nice wire wheel, so we're just gonna clean this up with my wire wheel that I have for my drill. We got braze running down the side of it, but as far as that goes, that's just all aesthetics. This looks like it's in there really well, actually. It's looking all right. So here we go. Get a better look at this. Get a little ugly on the side, but I really don't care as long as it works. I'm gonna be happy. So I say we go give this a little test, see if it'll take the warp out of this blade. Okay, so here we are on a flat. You can see if I press down here, we have this little bit of warp right there. I mean, it's less if I press down on here. The tang's not a big deal because I can grind that, bend that into shape. But you can see it's just a little bit, it's not much. All that's gonna happen is I'm gonna find the warp, I'm gonna put this on the anvil and give it some little taps. And basically what that does is it stretches the material, just like in forging, and it'll press that warp back down. So if we're pushing this material out, it's gonna wanna force this to go down. So my anvil is not flat, nor do I want it really flat. So I will just kind of look at this and then keep an eye on it that way. As soon as it's straight to my eye, then that's when I know the warp has come out. But I'm just doing little taps right around in the area where it started curving. And from what I understand is it doesn't take much, but all I know is it's knocking off that forge scale. I don't know. I can't really tell if it's coming out yet or not. So in case you haven't heard about this technique, so what happens is the tungsten carbide is harder than the hardened steel. So it'll still dent the steel enough to stretch the material. And my question is, when you get this straight, if you have grinding left to do, when you grind off the material that you stretched, is it just gonna bounce back? I have no idea. It's something I'll have to test out. But I won't be grinding on any of this material that I'm actually tapping on. So in this case, I don't think it's gonna do anything. Yeah, so it actually is pulling out the warp. Interesting. I'm trying not to hit on my maker's mark because I feel it'll take the maker's mark away. Yeah, it's really hard to tell. I mean, I feel like it's coming out. So anyway, I'm just gonna work on this a little bit. It's gonna take a little bit of tapping is all, and it should work right on out. Yeah, we're actually almost there. Interesting. All right, with that warp taken care of, hopefully it doesn't come back, I'm going to scribe some lines on here. Scribe my bevel lines. So I usually like to come down to about like where this is in line with the handle. And I'm going to be about there. Obviously it doesn't have to be perfect, but we'll just scribe a line there and scribe a line there. That way we know how high our bevels are going to go. And then I come over here to my messy little flat, and this should still be right in the middle because I did mark it when I was doing my rough grinds and I never adjusted it after the fact. So this should be still good. Yeah, looks pretty good to me. And then I'm just going to mark both sides. And that way I can keep this right down the middle. Okay, now over to the grinder. So I'm just going to get crazy with the 36 grit for a little bit until I get my lines close. And then I'll switch to the 80 and then 120 and then on to the secret weapon. So basically I'm just working slowly up to my profile lines and then into my center line. That way we'll keep a nice centered apex. Okay, here I am off the 36 grit. You can see my lines are very close to my scribed line, and then we're nice and straight. Even though I've got a line down here, I still pull this up and check from time to time just to make sure, because it's easier to tell when you're looking at it from this angle versus this angle if you're, if you've got some waves in it. But from this point, gonna go over to the 80 grit and get these cleaned up a little bit more, and then up to the 120, and then that'll basically be where everything is almost finalized. And then I got to throw this into the sandblasting machine to get all this forge scale off, or the sandblasting cabinet to get all this forge scale off. Okay, here we are. So I cleaned up the forged area, the brute to forge. with the sandblast cabinet, and then I gave it a quick scrub with a wire brush, so now it's all nice and pretty. And then I put some heat on the tang to take all the hardness out of it, or the majority of the hardness. And now we're on to the secret weapon. So I'm sure you've heard a bunch about waterfall platens and all that stuff, but a lot of makers, a lot of equipment companies, the people who are making these awesome 2x72 grinders, I think they're really missing out on skipping the 4x36 or the 6x48 grinders. So what this is great for is if you don't have any plunge lines like I don't on here, this is perfect for kind of working the scratch lines, the 120 scratch lines out. So they're nice and parallel with the blade, with the edge, just like you would do with hand sanding. So if you were just going to go up to 220 or 400 or whatever and you don't have a plunge line, this thing is absolutely fantastic. Not only does it do that, but it also straightens up your bevel lines if you haven't gotten them straight. So I'll show you how I work this. This is a somewhat new belt. One other good thing to do is grab yourself some vice grips and get a hold of the back side of this with the vice grips, because it's easy to lose this and have it shoot across your shop. This makes it a little bit easier to hold on to. And as you can see, it's already starting to work out the 120. Doesn't take a lot, especially with a new belt. I'll kind of show you where I'm at, but I mean right here you can, I'm hoping this is working on the camera, but you can see nice and clean up here, and we're still getting some scratch lines out of the middle. So clearly, I'm not quite straight with mine, but close. They'll be out of here pretty quick. Still working on this, but almost done. I'm on the other side here. Oh, so close. Okay, scratches are gone. And here you go. So you can see all of those 120 scratches are out. And also that Harmiey line is just, it almost doesn't even need any work to it. It's just begging to be seen. So next step, I just need to chamfer the edges of this choil area where you know, your finger is going to be rubbing against, because I want that to be comfortable. And then there's going to be some hand sanding. I'm not entirely sure where I'm going to go with the hand sanding on this. I typically stop at 600, but I might go one more step to 1,000, just to get a little cleaner. And then I'm trying to decide if I want to do my typical ferric etch or if I want to try the lemon juice again. Probably just the ferric, but who knows? We'll see what happens. All right, well, that was a big old pain in the tuchus. So somehow I got some sort of resist on the blade, and every time I'd etch, I was getting left with big streaks of spots where the ferric wasn't etching. So basically I had to go back through and re-hand sand, but I only had to hand sand at like 800. So in the end, it turned out okay. It was just a lot of extra work, but as you can tell, a nice hamon pulled out of this. So the steel is definitely good for hamons. I can vouch for that. It's kind of funny. Right up in this area right here, there's a bunch of little dots. Not quite sure if you can see them, but that's where I actually hit the material with the tungsten carbide hammer. So not entirely sure why it left bright spots, but that's kind of funny. Anyway, this will end this video. And from here, I just got to cover up this blade, and I'm going to start working on the handle. And I haven't decided at all what colors I want to do yet or anything like that. But I'm pretty sure I'll get it figured out. But anyway, if you have any questions, please leave a comment. I'll get back with you. And again, as always, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you in the next one.